Well, good evening, everyone. We are almost in September. It is still August 28th, Monday, and of 2023. And we're going to be talking tonight to Judi on the dangers and the deceptions of an Article 5 convention. Thank you so much, Judi, for joining us. I'm going to do a quick little introduction. She has been a member of our state board for Eagle Forum of California for 15 years. And as our Constitution and Article 5 issue director, she's also a lobbyist against the Article 5 conventions for the National Eagle Forum. Thank you so much for all of your efforts. And she has written many articles on this subject and gives great talking points for speaking out against Article 5 convention. She is passionate about holding our public servants accountable to their oaths of office and to support the Constitution that we have. And she lives in Nevada City of California. So let's welcome Judi, and I'm going to turn on her presentation. Thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Oh, thank you, Summer. Let's see, I must correct, I am not the national lobbyist for Eagle Forum. That's, yeah, I stay at my computer in California. So, but I do go all around the country to the States. And it's been how many years? 8 years, I think, that Orlean and I started in California lobbying against the Article 5 convention when it came here through Mark Meckler. So it's been a while. Almost, yeah, that was 2015, so it's almost a decade. So I am mostly a political person on this issue and follow it around the country. So what I'm giving you here at the beginning, before I tell you what's going on in the States, is probably about a half hour of the constitutional presentation, and I'm not an attorney. I get a lot of this from Joanna Martin, who is an attorney, and follow this issue around. So here we go. And we'll have questions at the end. To usher in the Great Reset or the New World Order, the globalists must get rid of our Constitution. And the easiest way to get rid of our Constitution, short of a hostile takeover, is for Congress to call a convention under Article 5 of the US Constitution. And to get Congress to call a convention under Article 5, 2/3 of the state legislatures must pass a resolution asking Congress to call a convention. And that's what the push for an Article 5 convention is all about, getting a new constitution. Slide 2, Summer. Here's Article 5. It is only one paragraph, and actually it's one long sentence. It provides two methods for amending our Constitution. One is that Congress proposes amendments, and the other is that Congress can call a federal convention so that the delegates to the convention can propose amendments if 2/3 or 34 states apply. So the delegates propose the amendments. And so if you read just the red on the Article 5 convention process, it's the Congress, on the application of the legislatures of 2/3 of the states, shall call a convention for proposing amendments, which shall be valid when ratified by 3/4 of the states. It's either by the legislatures or conventions. The first method was used for our existing 27 amendments. Congress proposed them and sent them to the states for ratification. But the second method has never been used in all of these 236 years. Congress has never called a convention under Article 5. They are dangerous. Slide 3, please. Delegates to a convention, as sovereign representatives of we the people, have the inherent right, quote here in the Declaration of Independence, second paragraph, to alter or to abolish our form of government as expressed by the Declaration of Independence. And we don't know who those delegates would be or how they'd be selected. So how did we get from our first convention, our first constitution, which was the Articles of Confederation, to our current constitution? And that would be slide 4. There was a convention to amend our first constitution. The convention of 1787 was called by the Continental Congress for the sole and express purpose of revising the Articles of Confederation. But the delegates ignored their instructions from Congress and from their states, who also wrote instructions, and they wrote a new constitution instead. So we're on our second constitution. And in Federalist Paper number 40, James Madison, who is the father of our Constitution, invoked the Declaration of Independence when he wrote about the, quote, transcendent and precious right, unquote, of a people to throw off one government and set up a new one as justification for the delegates ignoring their instructions and writing a new constitution. You can't stop that from happening at another convention. In the past, conservatives defeated the periodic pushes for a constitutional convention. So the progressives marketed a convention to appeal to conservatives. They falsely claimed that a convention could be limited by the subject of the application or resolution that the state passed. They used a balanced budget amendment, or a BBA, as bait to hook conservatives on the idea of an Article 5 convention. And it worked. The BBA was passed in 32 states in the late 1970s and early 80s before the states began rescinding their applications. Phyllis Schlafly was instrumental in exposing the con, as I call it, and rescinding applications in the 1980s. The Article 5 convention issue mercifully died down, but then reared its ugly head once again about a decade ago, around 2011. Slide 5. Proving that there's nothing new under the sun, Mark Meckler, who's on the top right, his so-called Convention of States, also called COS for Convention of States Organization, packaged their applications to appeal to conservatives today. Now, Convention of States, I say it's so-called because it's named purposely, and I don't call it that, to imply that the states can control the convention. This is really the best public relations money can buy going on here. The very name Convention of States implies control by the states. They may have had focus groups to figure this out. There was lots of money going into this as early as 2011, when Mark Meckler was still with the Tea Party. Convention of States, and I'm talking about them because they're the most dangerous of the organizations, tells conservatives that a convention is the only way to rein in an out-of-control federal government, and that their convention will be limited to proposing amendments that limit the power and jurisdiction of the federal government. And it would have fiscal restraints and term limits on Congress and federal officers is in there too. That's what their application says anyway. Slide 6, please. But in fact, the subject of the COS application, and here's the resolution, is so broad, it includes most of the Constitution, because you see, limiting the power and jurisdiction of the federal government is what the Constitution is all about. So as one even proponent of a convention said, a constitutional scholar said that it is limited to everything. So Convention of States uses the classic tactics of the left. They're not telling the truth. They smear their opponents, which are us, and they have divided conservatives. Those who fell for the false marketing have been manipulated to attack conservatives who are warning about a convention. They say we're fear-mongering. Slide 7, please. This is George Soros when they passed their first application in Vermont in 2014, the left did, to take money out of politics. Kind of ironic that George Soros would be behind it. So meanwhile, avowed Marxists also want a convention. These groups, like Wolfpack, are appealing to progressives pushing an amendment which would ostensibly take money out of politics. So whatever the subject of the application, it's being used as bait to hook people into the issue so that they'll be for a convention. Next slide, please. And that's right, George Soros, the financier of global fascism, is pumping millions of dollars into the same side of the Article 5 campaign that Convention of States is pumping millions of dollars into. Imagine a convention endowed with more power than the federal government, populated by activists with a commitment to social justice as their purpose, with no allegiance to the Constitution. Wolfpack is the main group promoting this. The Young Turks is their media arm, both funded by George Soros. That's Larry Lessig, who ran for president, funded by Soros, friend of Mark Meckler's, and he's the one that tried to get the electoral votes from Trump, very much in favor. To understand why an Article 5 convention is an unnecessary risk, we can recall that our Constitution is already limited a lot. It delegates only a handful of enumerated powers to Congress. Next slide, please. With our Constitution, the framers created a federation of states united under a national government, only for the limited purposes enumerated in the Constitution, and mostly they're in Article 1, Section 8. The framers listed every power we granted to the national government. All our Constitution authorizes the national government to do over the country at large falls into 4 categories. Number 1, military defense and international commerce and relations. 2, immigration and naturalization. 3, establish a commercial system with uniform weights and measures, patents and copyrights, a money system based on gold and silver, bankruptcy laws, mail delivery, and some road building. And 4, with some of the amendments, secure certain civil rights. That's it. All other powers are reserved by the states or the people. It is only with respect to the enumerated powers listed in the Constitution that the national government has lawful authority. If it's on the list, Congress may make laws about it. But if it's not on the list, Congress usurps power and acts unlawfully when it meddles. There's about 21 powers, and I can get you a flyer that Joanna did. If anyone wants it, they can email me later. But everyone ignores the Constitution. So the federal government was able to usurp thousands of powers not on the list. State and local governments are complicit with the usurpations by taking federal funds to implement unconstitutional federal programs. To claim these problems can be fixed by amending our Constitution makes as much sense as saying that since people violate the 10 Commandments, God should amend the 10 Commandments. But Meckler's organization, COS, insists that the problem is the Constitution, and they want to change the structure of the Constitution, they say. The claim that we can control those who ignore the Constitution by amending the Constitution is absurd. Next slide. The Constitution is not the problem. Ignorance of the Constitution is the problem. And you can't fix that by amending the Constitution. Convention of States claims that the framers added the convention method of getting amendments to Article 5 so that when the federal government violates the Constitution, we can rein them in by amending the Constitution. This is one of these things, how could you tell when the Convention of States speakers are telling the truth, are not telling the truth, is when their mouth is moving. But none of the framers, including anti-federalist George Mason, who they talk about a lot, believed or ever said what the Convention of States claims he said. The framers knew an amendment can't be used to take away powers that the Constitution never granted to the federal government in the first place. Instead, the framers agreed that the purpose of amendments is to fix defects in the Constitution. George Mason's concern was that Congress might refuse consent to amendments needed to fix defects in the Constitution, like slavery was a defect in the Constitution. So he didn't want the new Constitution to require Congress's approval of amendments. The framers also recognized that the purpose of a convention is to get a new Constitution. The Anti-Federalists at the convention hated this Constitution. George Mason said on August 31st, 1787, that he would sooner chop off his right hand than put it to the Constitution as it now stands. And if it weren't changed to suit his views, he wanted another convention. So Mason didn't sign the Constitution. Yet Convention of States President Mark Meckler does this in almost every legislature that he testifies for, except the Democratic ones. He spins the George Mason fabrication featuring the Convention of States hero, George Mason, and his foresight and wisdom to give us the convention method of Article 5 to rein in a future tyrannical government in legislature after legislature. It seemingly justifies Convention of States existence. They have, you can change the slide now somewhere. Thank you. This is what Meckler says at almost every legislature or every Republican legislature. He's visualizing that he could have been there listening. And when George Mason spoke up to say, wait a minute, we need another way besides just Congress proposing amendments, he said, are we so naive to believe that a federal government that becomes a tyranny will ever propose amendments to restrain its own tyranny? George Mason never said that. We have James Madison's notes of the convention, but time after time after time, they attribute that to George Mason when it was supposed to correct defects in the Constitution. So they knew that amendments can't control governments which ignore the Constitution. The First Amendment didn't stop them from banning Christian speech in the public square. The Second Amendment didn't stop them from restricting guns and ammo. The Fourth Amendment didn't stop them from spying on us without a warrant. The Fifth Amendment didn't stop them from uncompensated regulatory takings. And the 10th Amendment didn't stop them from usurping thousands of other powers. So an amendment isn't the right tool for reining in the federal government. So Convention of States' claim that they can get amendments to rein in the power and jurisdiction of the federal government is false. There's another agenda going on. Convention of States claims that state legislators will control the convention, and convention delegates have no power to do anything except rubber stamp decisions dictated by state legislatures. They tell them this right after, Meckler tells them this right after he flatters them, tells them how important they are and that they were just like the framers. They were you, and that's why they gave you all this power. But that isn't in Article 5. Convention of States made it up. The only power granted to the state legislatures by Article 5 is the power to ask Congress to call a convention, period. Once 2/3 of the states apply for the convention, it's out of the state legislature's hands. So this is the next slide. I don't know if it did that on its own, but that's okay. In fact, well, of course, the state legislatures, if Congress says they can ratify what comes out of an amendment that comes out of the convention, if the convention doesn't rewrite the Constitution. So this is a necessary and proper clause. And it gives Congress, in fact, the power to organize the convention, which would include the delegate selection process, deciding what that would be, and the initial rules of the convention. And it's right here is it gives Congress the power to carry out the other powers vested in the Constitution in the government of the United States, which is Article 5. So, but in fact, after the convention convenes, they could change the initial rules. They'll have the delegates there, and they can then do whatever they want. So we come up with arguments like this, and sometimes legislatures listen to us, And in Montana in 2023, they did not want Congress to be in charge of selecting the delegates and the process to carry out the convention. So the convention of states, they make up things as they go along. They actually told the legislatures in Montana that what you're looking at, Article 1, Section 8, last clause, that it lists the powers of the government in the other clauses, and then this is the last clause, that they can make the laws to carry out other things in the Constitution. They told them that this was not a power granted to Congress, even though it says that in the Constitution. They said that because of Article 5, this power is granted to state legislatures instead. And sadly, some Montana legislatures believe them. It's really incredible what they do go along with when they hear from the Convention of States, who has a lot of credibility among the legislatures because they have a lot of money to spend. So next slide, please. The biggest risk of an Article 5 convention is a runaway convention. This is where the convention delegates supposedly go rogue, ignore the instructions of their states or Congress and the applications, and they write a new constitution and they change their form of government. Conventions of states and other groups say that this cannot happen because of the ultimate safeguard, and that's in place to prevent a runaway convention, and that is that 38 states, or 3/4 of the states, need to ratify whatever is proposed at the convention. But that isn't true. A new constitution would have its own mode of ratification. That precedent was set in 1787. Our first constitution, which was the Articles of Confederation, required the Continental Congress and all of the then 13 states to approve the amendments. But our second constitution, drafted at the Amendments Convention of 1787, provided at Article 7 that it would require only 9 states for ratification. So if we have another convention, nothing could stop the delegates from proposing a third constitution with its own new and easier mode of ratification. Convention of States claims they know exactly how a convention will operate by custom. State legislatures will make the rules and appoint and control their delegates. Each state will get 1 vote, and the convention will be limited to the subject of the application. In other words, the state legislatures will be in control of the Constitution from start to finish, and they say that every application has to be the same. This was a myth invented by the convention lobby, that all the applications need to be alike and that they can't go off of the subject of the application, in order to bolster their claim that the convention couldn't run away, because they had to get votes from the state legislatures on these applications, and they weren't going to vote for the convention if it was going to run away. But there are no customs. There's never been an Article 5 convention. It's totally unknown. The convention lobby equates irrelevant interstate conventions between 3 or more states that share common problems or interests, like hazardous waste on a shared river, with a constitutional convention to alter our founding document. The only precedent in our history, I don't know if you could hear my dogs barking, is for a constitutional convention. The only convention that was a constitutional convention is in 1787 in Philadelphia, where the delegates wrote a new constitution. The Constitutional Convention, they have another argument. This one must have taken a focus group as well. Next slide, please, Summer. The Constitutional Convention is different than a convention of states. You can hear the legislators sponsoring their legislation parroting this. They say, oh, it is totally different. A constitutional convention could rewrite the Constitution, but a convention of states is in Article 5, and it has to be 1 state, 1 vote, and it's totally controlled. These are all the same names, different names for things that are essentially the same. Convention for proposing amendments is what the Constitution says. or an amendments convention. The term constitutional convention is a red flag to conservatives who understand the risks involved. They were schooled by Phyllis Schlafly and Eagle Forum and by JBS, John Birch Society. So convention of states leaders use semantics, and they insist a convention of states is not a constitutional convention. And that claim is believed and routinely repeated by legislators who sponsor their legislation in committee and on their chamber floors when they're doing the final votes. They say that only a constitutional convention is plenipotentiary. They even say that they met in 1787 in order to write a new constitution to bolster that argument. But we're all talking about the same convention that is called by Congress per Article 5. Convention of states cannot have it both ways. They cannot proclaim the enormous power of an Article 5 convention to take back our government and at the same time leash the delegates and deny their sovereignty. They actually go around and testify at these committees and say, these are just suggestions conventions. What are people afraid of? They call us afraid. Convention of states needed a response for this question, another argument of theirs. If the feds won't obey the Constitution we have now, why would they obey an amended Constitution? Next slide, please. Unbelievably, Mark Meckler started to carry around a very heavy book. It's like one of those huge dictionaries, and insist that it was the Constitution. And this is what you'll get if you call the US Government Publishing Office and give them $130 and order a constitution. This is what you get. You really can't make this stuff up, but they do. This is the annotated book of all the US Supreme Court cases. He says, this is the Constitution, it's the Constitution we're following, and that's why we need to amend it. So during 2016, the Convention of States staged a 3-day simulated convention at Williamsburg, Virginia, supposedly to show that a convention called by Congress under Article 5, at that convention, the delegates would do nothing more than come up with wise amendments to limit the power and jurisdiction of the federal government. Convention of States invited mostly friendly Republican state legislatures, but legislators came from every state, including those who sponsored COS legislation to attend. And the pretend delegates to the all-expense-paid extravaganza proposed 6 amendments which vastly increased the powers of the federal government. None of their proposed amendments, not one, limits the power and jurisdiction of the federal government. They do the opposite. They grant new powers or legalize powers that the feds have already usurped. For example, under our existing Constitution, only Congress has the power to make law. That's Article 1, Section 1. But one of the amendments would transform into law every word, order, dictate, ruling, or opinion issued in the executive branch of the federal government if approved by Congress within 180 days. Apparently, the 2016 mock convention was so successful in terms of public relations that Convention of States staged another pretend convention earlier this month, possibly to compensate for their lack of progress in 2023. There is no amendment on the face of this earth which can make those who ignore the existing limits in the Constitution obey the Constitution. When the feds usurp powers not delegated, and when state and local governments accept federal funds to implement unconstitutional federal programs, all of them are ignoring the existing constitutional limits on federal powers. Convention of States did prove that if we have a convention now, George Washington, James Madison, Ben Franklin, and Alexander Hamilton won't be there. Who will be there? People who are constitutionally illiterate and persons of insidious views who can steer them to the predetermined outcome, which is almost certainly a third constitution. A third constitution would have its own mode of ratification. Next slide, please. New constitutions are already waiting in the wings. The proposed new states constitution of America was produced by the Ford Foundation. It took 10 years, 100 staffers, and $25 million to complete, and creates a dictatorship. The new state's constitution is ratified by a national referendum called by the president, or a national popular vote. Who controls the voting machines? They will get whatever they want ratified. Under this constitution, the states are to be dissolved and replaced by regional governments answerable to the new national government. Next slide. Here is the Constitution. That's the first one. And then there's the Constitution for the Socialist Republic in North America, proposed by the Revolutionary Communist Party USA. You might have to click on it somewhere to get the, or they automatically pop up. The Constitution 2020 movement is backed by George Soros. He wants a Marxist constitution. Next slide, please. And the next slide is the task force report on the North American Union from the Globalist Council on Foreign Relations. This provides for a parliament to be set up over and above Canada, the United States, and Mexico. This is altogether repugnant to our existing constitution. Before they can move us into the North American Union, they need a convention to get rid of our current constitution. Next slide. The National Constitution Center has a constitution drafting project. They have proposed 3 new constitutions, and they chose people to put them together. I'm sure they paid them for it. They have, here, there's the Progressive Constitution, the Libertarian Constitution, and the, quote, conservative, end quote, Constitution. All 3 of these constitutions delegate massive new powers to the federal government. They eliminate the natural-born citizen requirement to be president. The Libertarian Constitution has open borders. The so-called conservative and progressive constitutions provide for the election of president by national popular vote. And the conservative Constitution grants massive powers to a new federal government and imposes gun control with red flag confiscations. Robert P. George, who's the first name there on the conservative Constitution, from Princeton, I believe he's a law professor, is a member of Mark Meckler's Convention of States Legal Advisory Committee from the beginning, from 2014. He co-drafted the so-called conservative Constitution. In fact, Robert P. George and C. Boyden Gray, another member of Meckler's Legal Advisory Board, are both members of the Council on Foreign Relations. Considering that the National Constitution is a quasi-governmental agency, getting a new constitution to replace our existing constitution appears to be federal government policy. But Convention of States says there's no danger in getting a new constitution because delegates can be controlled by state faithful delegate laws. That's absurd. Just as the states and the Continental Congress couldn't control the delegates to the Federal Amendments Convention of 1787, they can't control delegates to an amendment convention today. Delegates would have more power than state legislatures and Congress and aren't subject to state or federal laws. Next slide. Brilliant men have warned that delegates to a convention can't be controlled. Former U.S. Supreme Court Justice Arthur Goldberg reminds us in his September 14, 1986 editorial in the Miami Herald that any attempt at limiting the agenda would be almost certainly be unenforceable. Next slide is Chief Justice Warren Burger. Former U.S. Supreme Court Justice Warren Burger said in a June 1988 letter to Phyllis Schlafly, quote, after a convention is convened, it will be too late to stop the convention if we don't like its agenda. Next slide, please. Justice Arthur Gold. Oh, the one before that, I believe. Warren Burger. Is there one? Is there a next one? Oh well. Nope, go back. Okay, I guess what happened to the former U.S. court judge. Oh, anyway, former U.S. Supreme Court just these two got mixed up. Sorry about that. Justice Scalia said in April of 2014, I certainly would not want a constitutional convention. I mean, whoa, who knows what would come out of that? And before this, in 1979, 7 years before Justice Scalia was appointed to the Supreme Court for a 30-year tenure, he was for an Article 5 convention or a constitutional convention. He changed his mind. This is from 2014, and there's another quote from 2015. But Convention of States insists that he is a proponent of a convention of states. And when Justice Scalia died, the body wasn't even called before Meckler announced to the press that he was a great supporter of the Convention of States. And when we would point out that he changed his mind, he was opposed to Article 5 convention now, they have the audacity to say that we are insulting him. What do you call it? I forgot the word for it, but it's what we're doing to his legacy. I mean, we should be ashamed of ourselves because Justice Scalia was smart enough, we're insulting him, to know the difference between a convention of states and a constitutional convention. And of course, he was against a constitutional convention in 2014, but he's for a convention of states. Well, nobody talked about the Convention of States name. Meckler, they defined it in 2011 or around there. So he was definitely talking about a constitutional convention both times as a transcript of what he had to say. But still, they go around to legislatures, pass out the 1979 remarks, and the legislators fawn over how this is supported by Justice Scalia. Next slide, please. James Madison's, as you know, father of the Constitution, said in his letter to Tuberville that he trembled at the prospect of a second convention, and that there were an Article 5 convention, the most violent partisans and individuals of insidious views would strive to be delegates and would have a dangerous opportunity of sapping the very foundations of the fabric of our country. Madison also warned people who secretly want to get rid of our Constitution would push for a convention under the pretext of getting amendments. Are there violent partisans and individuals of insidious views among us today? Yes, and they want a convention. But convention supporters assure us that only moral and wise people will be delegates. Next slide. Do you believe that the delegates appointed to this convention would be the caliber of men such as George Washington, or Benjamin Franklin, or James Madison, or the caliber of women? Do you believe that a sizable contingent would be at the level of, Kamala Harris, Al Gore, AOC? Ask yourself, if we are not now, for the most part, electing to office people who support the Constitution, what makes you think that we will send constitutionalists to an Article 5 convention? So even though our Constitution isn't being enforced, it still declares that the federal government is lawless. The rule of law is still on our side, but not for long if we foolishly allow the Article 5 convention to be called. And I guess, let's see, I don't have a lot of time here, but I was going to go into I want to go into what's happening in the states as well. And I'll try to make this fast. This issue is so confusing because, and let's take this picture off the screen somewhere. I can't bear to look at it anymore. You could look at all of us, or the first slide, or anything. The issue is confusing because of all the disinformation that we hear. from the Convention of States and the other organizations who pick up on the same false arguments. Because without these untruths, the legislators wouldn't vote for it. We're mainly fighting in the states on the ground, Republicans. They've been fooled with the subject of the application. In fact, all of the, most of the legislators have been fooled. There are some Democrats and some Republicans who actually understand the issue and are opposed to all Article 5 convention, even if they're on the right to life or anything that we support. But no, we don't support them if it's through a convention, because that is just bait. And the delegates could talk about anything, propose anything, and impose this Constitution on us through whatever national popular vote by making the process easy. It's been a battle between Republicans and Democrats actually fighting with each other. And that's how we've managed to do quite well over this decade, although it's a cumulative thing. So there are a lot of states that pass these applications. But as long as the Republicans, are voting down the Democrat applications, the Democrats are voting down the Republican ones. And we need to find in these states, like, enough Republicans to join the Democrats to vote it down, or in the Democrat states, enough Democrats to join the Republicans to vote it down. And then there are law professors and constitutional scholars that do understand the issue and have our same arguments. And at this point, the Convention of States is waging a public relations war to give state legislators and Congress the false impression that people at the grassroots are demanding a convention. The groups have pretty much given up getting what they told us they'd get, even by 2016. They've told us that they'd get their convention by getting 34 applications on each subject. We find now that the balanced budget people are missing in action pretty much. So are the wolf pack people. They show up every now and then when they're needed to join with Republicans. The term limits people, I believe, are doing what Mark Meckler tells them to do. They take ideas that they have, and Meckler isn't that smart. He's from Nevada County, California, too. I knew him back when his mother was begging for $25 actually for Tea Party members to give him so he could be a full-time activist. There's a lot of backing that goes behind this, and the best public relations firms and lobbying groups are on their payroll, and they're getting paid by them on what little they need to report. We can see stuff like that. So they know they can't get that, so they're reevaluating how to count to 34. Now, counting to 34 used to be easy, but it's not anymore. And as we've gone on through the years, we've seen, I think there's an article that came out by a website called Hunt for Liberty. And they actually evaluated and said what they were going to do or were doing. It came out as being a suggestion from them, but this is what they were doing. They noticed that the state legislatures have had their fill of Article 5 convention talk and activities, and they were increasingly reluctant to pass these applications. They're getting totally sick of them. It causes huge controversy when they come up. They also noted that states were doing rescissions. It's actually the Common Cause mainly and Democrats that are rescinding applications that have been successful at rescinding them, and we need to rescind them. And they saw writing on the wall that we'd have more and more rescissions, but they see that there's a very deep negative feeling that millions of Americans have over the tremendous dysfunctioning and corruption displayed by Congress and by numerous federal agencies and departments. So they say Americans are totally disgusted, which is true. And as a consequence, this is a really good time to get people persuaded that state government needs to be in control, as if they would be. But it's a good time to get people on board for the Article 5 convention. So we got the timing right, but the state's not passing these applications very readily. And their conclusion is that let's just go for it. Let's take whatever applications we can that have just been sitting there. There's like passed 450 applications. About half of them have been rescinded since 1788. And they're looking at the rest of them and saying, how could we use a 230-year-old application and say that we passed an application? So they're combining the different applications is what they're doing. And they're doing everything they can possibly do now. There was a lawsuit by the balanced budget people suing Congress for not calling a convention. That was trashed by the Justice Department in very good arguments. They have a theory. They have I call it the time machine Article 5 convention argument, is where they go back to the year 1979 and they say, oh, we had a lot of applications then. We reached 34 applications when Nevada passed it. So the Congress needs to call a convention because of what happened in 1979. And the Nevada application was since rescinded in 2017. It doesn't matter to them. A lot of the applications have been. And it's ridiculous to go back, 40 years and say Congress has to call a convention, but those are the kinds of things they're doing. I noticed the Georgia application for the BBA in 2020 was the first one that they decided they already had 33 states. And they had something like 27 at the time. But they wrote other states into their application that never passed the BBA. And they were going to announce that they got the 34th state when Georgia passed it. The term limits people, that's another group, are counting every state that the Convention of States passed in. They passed in 6, but when they passed in 3, they were counting almost 30 states. And now Mark Meckler is counting states as Kansas, which he doesn't have on some podcasts. He says he got 20 states. Because Kansas needs 2/3 of each house of the legislature to pass an application. And the Convention of States has decided that's unconstitutional. So we're going through these slides. So they tried to get the 2/3 vote taken away in Kansas and in Maine this year. The progressives have joined with the globalist-backed so-called conservative organizations in New Hampshire and Maine and failed to do good in those states for themselves. The only thing that passed this year was a term limits application in Oklahoma, which wasn't even worth fighting because nobody cares. They claim they passed in Oklahoma anyway because of Convention of States, and they don't have a very good public relations machine. So this is all public relations, and it's all fighting arguments that don't exist. So we did great this year as far as we could. At the beginning of 2023, Meckler claimed he was going to get 4 to 7 states this year, and he got 0 states. All he did was a silly mock convention, which is actually on their website, conventionofstates.com. It's called Simulated Convention, I believe, and actually entertaining in parts. It's like 8 hours long. And they, over and over again, they talked about how short it was, only 2 days this year, not 3. And they had only 102 delegates, I think, instead of 137. But they were complaining about the shortness of time, but they kept saying, but we got to pass this to show so that people can see what conventions do. We got to pass something. So they clapped every time they passed something. And at one point, I don't know who did it, I'll have to go back and listen. They were arguing about the balanced budget amendment. They kept on introducing amendments to amend the amendments to the actual application that they proposed amendment that they were talking about. And at one point, the sponsor, someone was arguing that they couldn't pass the balanced budget amendment the way they had it, because if it had that wording, they would lose their federal funding. And we can't have that happen. So, they were even being complicit in their own meetings. So, and so what we need to look at today, there's 2 things going on. One of them is, I'm sorry about my dog barking. I could get up and close the window just a second because you can see me. I don't think. Anyway, that might help. Gavin Newsom has an Article 5 convention bill for gun control, for firearms restrictions. He's jumping on the bandwagon because he wants to be president. And there are constitutional scholars on the left that don't like that. I don't see how it can't go on the Senate. It's being heard tomorrow. there's enough senators that have co-sponsored to pass it. I don't know about the House, but it's the first one, and I didn't even think it would get introduced, but it has. And California's probably already being counted for their Wolfpack application anyway, so it's not a new state. It's not a huge concern, but it's interesting what's going to happen with that. It really should be amended to take out the Article 5 convention part of it, but they're not going to listen to conservatives on that. The other, disconcerting thing is HCon Res 24. And it was also last year, it had a number 101. It's by a Republican, Senator Arrington from Texas. It's a call for a convention. And it's not like it's 2,000 pages long and people can't read it. And so they can tell you what's untruths about what's in it, but they do it anyway. So it's sort of like that 1979 thing they have in the preamble to it, all these whereases. We got to 34 and even 40 applications way back in 1979. And then they talk about combining the balanced budget, fiscal responsibility applications with the unlimited applications, which are anything they count as an application that doesn't say it's for the sole and express purpose. So there's some of those. Some date back to 200 years or 100 years. Some are about the direct election of senators, which we've already got. And they're calling for a general convention that's not limited, but they call it the Fiscal Responsibility Act. And I understand that Congress doesn't have much of an appetite to take that up now. It's in the House Judiciary Committee. It's worth calling or writing to your however you contact your congressperson, because it's not like the states. When we write and we could use help on all these issues and know how to direct you, we put the names of all these legislators on and we email them all in groups. But Congress isn't like that. They won't talk to you if you're not their constituent. So that's a concern, because they're hearing the PR from Convention of States, which is like, everybody is demanding a convention. This is really exciting. They have a big voice. So that's, I guess, all I want to say. We've had a good year this year. Convention of States got 4 states in 2022, which was sad. So, but it doesn't matter. Nobody's counting anymore. They're just going for the end goal, the convention. Congress can count applications however they want. So, but the groups are trying to count it for them. So that's about it. I have left some time for questions if there are any.
Yeah, thanks, Judy, so much for all that information. And I know that you and Orlean have covered this topic. I've done presentation on this topic as well, and that this is something that we definitely need to be on guard about. What do you suggest that, people on this webinar or that listen to this webinar later can do? You said contacting their congressman.
Yeah, that's one thing, but we're still active in all the states. We have to fight the states because we have to fight this public relations battle. If the Convention of States can pass a committee and get tons of press over it, because they put it out themselves, and that they have publicists. Mark Meckler has a publicist. He says something and it can go in some big publication, and ours goes to ourselves. So we don't want them to get any little thing. So yeah, you can email me or Orlean or Summer know it's Judi Kaler, my name, JUDICALER @hotmail.com. If I don't respond, then maybe I didn't get it. You could try the same address at comcast.net, but sometimes that's forwarded to me. But try hotmail.com. And I can put you on the list so that you can get these blasts. Most of the work is from January. It stopped a lot at mid-June this year because the legislatures are open at the beginning and then they close. And this is, we're going on an election year coming up. So they might even close early again, but we put out the list of people to write to. We put out suggestions of what to write. And I have a friend that doesn't even understand the issue, but she knows I'm right. It is very confusing. And she'll write to the Republicans and say, I'm a Republican and I want you to vote no on, SJR 7. And that's all she writes. And you can do that to everyone, or you can make up a letter and you could send it to every state that comes up. I followed the legislation and we can see what's out there. We don't write to everything. We might do, I forgot to look, but there's probably 100 blasts each year, 120 sometimes. Sometimes we're blasting the same state and the same bill multiple times. I think my record's about 14, because the more controversy they get, the more likely they're to vote no. When a rescission bill comes up, you might not even hear from me except that it passed, because the more controversy that comes up on it, the more people are likely to vote no. Just, when you want to no vote, you can yell and scream as much as you want and you're helping. And we mostly do that. So we need rescissions because there are 12 states now that have no applications. Oregon was a big success this year, rescinding not too long ago all of their applications. If there were 5 more rescissions, then there would be 17 states without applications. It would be very difficult for Congress to call a convention, since that would leave only 33 states. But realistically, we've got to have at least 10 more than that. So these people will go away for another 2 or 3 decades. And they're having a tough time. They really are. They're fighting a ragtag bunch of people that are unfunded in this, and just citizens they're hearing from, and we're fighting tens of millions of dollars just from the Convention of States alone coming, and they don't have to report where it's coming from. But I did an article called Dark Money a couple of years ago, I think it was, and almost 2/3 of their money was coming in contributions from $5,000 to $2 million to major donors. And they go and testify and say, oh, it's my wife raises it in our home office above the garage or off the kitchen. And, there are all these little people. There's 100,000 little people. Meckler claims to have an army of 5 million people. That's just cannot be true. They make up these numbers. I was keeping track of them at one time, and it was like 0.7 or 0.8% of the population. If you knew the population of a state, you'd know how many people in that state supported Meckler. It was that silly. So,
well, let's open it up to Orlean's question here in just a second, but I just want to put a plug for Eagle Forum of California. You can go on our website. We're updating it soon, and we'll make sure that these webinars are available there. And please visit eagleforumca.us. That's our statewide website. The national website is just eagleforum.org, but for the state, it's eagleforumca.us. And we would love to have you subscribed to our email newsletters, and you can do that by just sending us an email from that website or emailing me directly. It's eagleforumca leader, LEADER @gmail.com. And that's a great way to get in contact with us later. And I'd love to have the list that you were talking about earlier too. If you send that to me, or any articles, we'd love to keep people informed on the handouts or information that you have. Orlean?
Well, thank you, Judi. I really appreciate all the good information, and the fact that you keep up on this and keep telling us what's going on. And it's nice to know that they had no success this year, but listening to them, you don't get the truth at all. They just love to tell us what wonderful people they are and how great they're doing. I thought it was really important to let people know that Glenn Beck once was supporting them and now is no longer. Can you tell us why he changed his mind?
Oh, I think he said in his little podcast that he changed his mind because of there wouldn't be moral and religious people at the convention chosen as delegates. I think that was his one thing. There's so many arguments to that, but that'll do. We take whatever we can get. And that was very big because he went on national radio and announced that. You still see his name among the supporters every once in a while. They have 3 or 4 dozen well-known supporters. They are likely paid advertising or something on the payroll somehow. We have pictures of these 3 right here on the screen, I see. Oh, no, that's Mark Levin. But between Michael Ferris, Mark Meckler, and Rick Santorum, because they hire former US congressmen, they very likely, the 3 of them, have over $1 million a year in salary. I mean, Ferris could be making as much as Meckler. Meckler, we've seen in 2020, was making $500,000 with him and his wife almost. Meckler, it's interesting that Meckler started out with seed money from going on board the John Hancock Committee of the States that was being run by Eric O'Keefe, who was distributing Koch brothers money. He brought Meckler aboard in 2011 when he was still with the Tea Party, and Meckler became president, and Meckler signed their 990 forms. He didn't have a salary then, but he had a $1.8 million budget to start. And money went to PR firms and lobbying firms that you could see on the financials. So this is not the way a grassroots organization begins. So, and Michael Ferris is from the homeschool movement, which was probably a grassroots organization at the time. I don't know, but these people, Ferris is particularly, and Meckler do major damage at the legislatures to us. Rick Santorum is not very good, but Tom Coburn before him wasn't very good either. He was at least nice. And Tom Coburn was earning $240,000 a year for 4 years. That was in the financials, almost $1 million in the 4 years he was there. So I can't see Santorum getting any less. So this is, and they call themselves grassroots.
Rick has a question. He says, is there a list of the states that support or are opposed to the Convention of States?
Well, we could, we know the states that passed the Convention of States applications. There are 19 of them, and we know who they are. But
is there a place to find that information?
Well,
or
I
is
don't
that
know
something
that
that we can, is that something that we can publish or post?
Well, there might be. I can't think of it off the top of my head, but right now it's not the most important thing because it was important when we thought that they were going to stick by waiting to get to 34. The most is, in any state that's passed it could rescind it. I guess I could make a list. I have little scribbles myself, but just because the state passed it doesn't mean the current legislature would be for it if it went up there again, because some of them passed it way back in like 2014. Georgia passed their first Convention of States application. Could it get through again? I don't know. But once it passes, and it's a cumulative effect. So even though it goes slow and they have all these burdens and all that, these challenges to pass, they still accumulate, and they could call a convention tomorrow based upon what's there now. It doesn't matter if, the 19 states that Meckler passed in, but I could, read them off. I could type them to somebody. I could do that.
I think I have them in my book, Judi. I updated it last year. And if you don't have a copy of my book, Rick, I'll be happy to send you one. It's called America Needs, what is it called?
Revival, not revision.
Wow.
Thank you. America Needs Revival, not revision.
When did you
and you can find all of Orlean's books at booksfortruth.com. She has amazing books, and one is about the Article 5 convention.
And the states, the states that passed the Convention of States and the Balanced Budget Amendment and term limits all together, they're almost all the same states. There's, the Convention of States passed in 2 states. They're all Republican states. The Convention of States passed in 2 states that the balanced budget isn't in now because one of them expired, it sunsetted, and the other one was South Carolina, which had also been rescinded, the BBA. But so there's like 29 of those. And then the other 3 would be the Wolfpack states, which are left. 2 of them rescinded. California, the way left. I think it's Vermont and Illinois are left. And you add all these groups together and you don't even get 34, except the old applications, which they can all use.
Okay, so
Judi, I did want to warn people about what David Barton is now doing and Rick Green. They have a wonderful course called Biblical Citizenship that I took, and it's absolutely perfect and great until the last course. And they then tell you that the way to save our Constitution from all the terrible evil that is out there is to have an Article 5 convention. And the last half of that final session, it's an 8-week session. The last half of it, they go into an Article 5. They have Mark Meckler speaking. They have Ken Ivory, who is here in Utah. I'm in Utah right now. That's why I can say that. And he was a former representative here, and they, of course, have these people as heroes. And I told the man we were meeting in his home, having this course that comes through a television screen presentation. When it was all over with, I told him, I would like to let you know the opposite side on this Article 5 convention. And I think I convinced him as well to not do this anymore. But it's sad how many people, fall for this, because David Barton has always been an amazing constitutional scholar and knows so much about our American history. And the first video I ever saw him do was America's Godly Heritage. And and then somehow he got involved in all of this, and they have a lot of very persuasive people speaking. So I just wanted to warn people about that.
Yeah, and I think
it's America's Godly Heritage, or how to be a biblical citizen.
I think you could just follow the money, Orlean. Ken Ivory was on the Convention of States payroll. At the same time, he was a Utah representative, and he was also a registered lobbyist for Convention of States in Wyoming and Iowa. And
Wow.
Rick, yeah, I'm sure that this Patriots Academy or whatever it is that they have is being funded by Meckler. I took Rick Green's course in 2011, and he was saying that nullification is unconstitutional in 2011, and I questioned that. And I didn't get into that, but that's what the framers wanted us to do: nullify unconstitutional. Just don't comply. Right. There's your solution.
David Campbell has a question. I'm going to unmute him. There you go, David.
Yeah, thanks, Summer, and thanks, Judi. Really interesting presentation. Lots there to take in and process. It's a twofold question. The 2 parts of the question aren't exactly related, but I think relevant. Picking up with what both was discussed and what Orlean mentioned, I attend a conservative group's presentations. They're monthly. I go when I can. They're down in Mountain View. It's the Liberty Forum. And they have tabling there almost every meeting with a fellow or a small team representing Convention of States. So I'm just confused by, they seem to get a pretty good reception there too. So it's hard without you knowing him, or I don't recall his name, but it just seems like there's so much confusion around it sounding like a good concept, a sound concept, a good idea. And people then, good patriots and Americans and constitutionalists otherwise being confused by the complication of it. That's kind of one problem set or question. And the other is, I understand that Governor Newsom is proposing a convention of states of sorts with respect to the Second Amendment. And I was wondering if you could speak to that, if that's relevant to the topic as you've presented. Thank you.
Yeah, Convention of States people are all over the place. They're raising money. They have fooled good people, good patriots. Their speakers, Mark Meckler has gotten so good at speaking. You know, he could sell ice to Eskimos and they love it. You know, it's not the truth, but it flows from him, and it seems to make sense to them at the time. There was a website of people who do not like Mark Meckler that a friend of mine was on. I think, sure, she sent me something, and they love the issue, though. They think he's right about the issue, but they're beginning to look at some things about him that they don't like. It's very difficult because all they see is what the Convention of States is on their website. It's, you could read their points, and it's false, 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 false. They can control everything, and then they put up these. Rob Natelson is one of their constitutional scholars who wrote a book, and is waving his book around. It's called The Law of Article 5. They have people with credentials that they just say, look, so-and-so says this, and everyone says, ooh, well, that must be right. Look at Michael Ferris. I'd like to know what Michael Ferris did in court for Phyllis Schlafly with the Equal Rights Amendment, because he talks about that all the time. He lists his credentials as one of the only people that has experience as an Article 5, attorney, and he's been to the Supreme Court. I don't know if it was just an amicus brief or what. I'd like to find out if it wasn't much, because he sure uses that. And Mark Levin has credibility too, but people are in it with salary, with advertising. We know Sean Hannity doesn't know much about the Constitution, and he's on there. There's 3 or 4 dozen people on there. Sometimes you see Jenna Ellis or Candace Owen or something. It looks like a paid commercial. So yeah, they're people. It's really sad. They've been fooled, and sometimes they just can't be talked to, or sometimes just you can say something to them if you understand the issue, and they'll immediately change their mind. But they are out there.
Did you say that Jenna Ellis and Candace Owens are supporters of the ConCon?
Well, I think Jenna Ellis, I haven't looked on the website lately to see if they're still on it or they are on it, but Jenna Ellis did a long thing on it, enthusiastic. What Candace Owen did on it looked like a commercial. Yeah, people that and love, you would be surprised. And that is very smart, because that's what the PR firms do, is get endorsements first. And then people look at, who Mark Levin likes it, it must be good. They don't ever look into it. And
and here in California, Shannon Grove was proposing it, as you and I were able to talk to her about it, hopefully.
But I'll bet you she votes against. That she votes against Newsom's Article 5 convention, because she will not understand that it's not about the subject of the application. So she'll be okay on that one. But if Mark Meckler to walk in the door, she'd go sponsor it again in California.
So tell us more about Newsom's. David Campbell had asked about Newsom's.
Oh, it's just a short, it's SJR 7, and it has all these restrictions, I think, that are probably already pretty much the law in California. I forgot what they are. I think it lowers the age, or raises the age that you can get a gun, and I think it gets into the mental health of the person using the gun. It's just listed. It's short, but the thing is, Newsom goes around and does all this stuff for publicity, so he could be out there and win a nomination for president. And he doesn't usually follow through with these things. So, I would
go on Gun Owners of California. They have written a letter opposing the SJR 7, and it's well written. So I would suggest just checking out the Gun Owners of California's letter of opposition. You can Google it. I also put it in the comments on the side.
Oh, yeah, they would be opposed to that. So would probably the National Rifle Association. But when you get into the issue is limiting the power and jurisdiction of the federal government, although, is that the one that used to have, has the son on now, Eric? What's the last name of the national guy for the gun owners of America? Used to be someone better on the Article 5 convention, his father. But they took away their support in Pennsylvania. They were just like neutral because these groups are afraid to lose members and lose money. And so the gun owners is another one that can talk all they want about being against Newsom's, but you put a, you know, put one of Meckler's in there and you won't hear from them because they're not understanding or they're afraid of it. And yeah, so Newsom wants to go through the Article 5 convention method, and I don't think that, I think they're just supporting it because it's Newsom. So it may pass. He has a lot of co-sponsors on there, all Democrats. It'd be interesting for someone to call Shannon Grove and see why she's voting against that one and would go sponsor the other one. The Republicans need to be set straight too, but I don't know what to say to them. They'll vote against it anyway. And there's only 18 of them in the, I guess, 18 out of 80 in the House. Yeah, there's like 8 of them in the Senate. Yeah, they're not, it's going to be the Democrats. They're going to have to be talked to by the Democrat people who understand what Article 5 is. And this dean in Berkeley, he's written an article in the Sacramento Bee. He is a big supporter of gun control and firearms restrictions and a big opponent to the Article 5 convention. And it's people like that who have to get, who should pick up the phone and call Newsom and say, you're out of touch. But it's probably not a huge threat to the movement. But it popularizes it. All these people, that's the first thing they think of. Oh, we want to do this? Oh, let's have a convention. They don't understand the issue. They don't know the ramifications. So, I hope that people, when I spoke, I think for Eagle Forum years ago, there was a couple of people in the audience that had signed the petition and everything, but they never heard the other side. So if you can learn it and talk about it a little to people or give them a flyer or something, they'd probably, a lot of those people would be surprised that you see setting up booths. Why is Convention of States roaming around California? I would guess they're trying to get money because California's, we had such great success in California because they were all Democrats and they didn't want any fiscal restraints. It's always for the wrong reasons. But we were so encouraged. I went to Texas next, and we've been all over the country. And Eagle Forum National has been supporting us, our little group with monitoring service, so that we could follow the legislation. So we'll know what's happening everywhere. Every time a bill moves, we know about it.
Question.
Yes, go ahead, Rick.
Okay, so where you said Eagle Forum National is supporting you. How are they supporting this? How are they informing the other Eagle Forum groups in other states and keeping the communications of this information open? Obviously, because you're in California, this is a hot topic in California. What I hear a lot of is that people are unaware of the background and the dangers of the Convention of States. So therefore, things happen that we would not like to happen. So how do we best inform folks in other states of this issue so that we can be more informed and take advantage of the hard work that you guys are doing there? That's why I asked the question earlier about a list of states. Orlean, you have the list in your book. However, that was a year or so ago. It's a dynamic process.
I updated it last year, but it hasn't changed any this year.
Yeah, it hasn't changed since you wrote that. The convention, I mean, those states that they're in can rescind, but they're, rescinding these applications in Republican states is next to impossible. It's very, very difficult. Best thing is to rescind them to talk to your legislator and all that. But this is kind of under the radar. It's not really that well known in California either. This is the first time I was doing stuff in California in years. I haven't been to California since 2016, I don't think. First time I put out a blast. That when I said they're supporting us, well, they do have a national lobbyist and maybe doing things at that level. And the president of Eagle Forum, Chris, I think might be doing some stuff on Article 5. I don't know what they're putting out to people in the various states that they do, but they do read my blasts that come through, and they do give us a grant each year for the service, which we have to buy. You can see what bills are moving for free, but you have to buy a service if you want to get alert and monitored. And they've done that for us for 7 years. It's modest, but it's without it, it's much more difficult. So it seems this issue seems to have a following of, I don't know, Article 5 nerds or something. I try not to call it the Convention of States, because it's not a sexy topic, but it's behind everything, because whatever you're working on is probably I'm sure will be effective if we don't have our Constitution. And so it's difficult to explain, and it's complicated. So certain people go for it, and it's really difficult to, get to the general public with it, like Convention of States do. They're just everywhere with their, millions of dollars. The 3 years that I looked at showed on those, what I saw, $26 million. And it's just heavily, heavily funded. They wine and dine the legislators. They have access to them. It is amazing what they haven't been able to do with all they've tried. So, we're encouraged, because it makes no sense what they're doing. But we do put out blasts to the various states, and, so they can get emails from anybody. And generally, they don't know the difference. They might ask you if you're a constituent, but usually they don't. And if they get some controversy going on the issue, sometimes because of COVID, they started Zoom testimony. And so some people can get on Zoom and talk about it for a few minutes at a hearing sometimes. Everything helps. But
Rick, you're in Alabama. I can't remember what state.
Oh, is
I'm
he
in
in Alabama?
I escaped from California about 30 years ago.
Where are you?
Huntsville area. North
Oh,
Alabama.
so did you know about everything going on in Alabama this year?
Reference what? A lot of things going on in Alabama.
They tried to rescind the application, the Convention of States, all the applications that Alabama passed. It failed, but
they tried to rescind it and it failed.
Yeah, and that's what I was thinking of when I was saying next to impossible on a Republican state, because they had 23 counties had passed, Republican groups, the Republican committees. This is where you start with Republican states, have passed resolutions to rescind the applications. And it went through their county committees, and then it became a state. I don't know how the Republicans work exactly, but it was on the state platform to rescind the applications. So when it first came out, all these legislators said, hey, yeah, that sounds great. And they had also the support. And then it got through a committee. I was shocked. It got through a committee, but I saw that that's what the person organizing in Alabama had done before he started. And that's what got it through the committee. He had a date to get it on the floor in a few days. It probably would have passed. I think it was the Senate. No, the House first. I think it would have passed. And then he stalled it. That was really bad. He didn't realize it was controversial. It was a new legislator, and they were trying to educate all the people. They have to sneak these things through, just like the Convention of States tries to sneak their legislation through before we have a chance to oppose it. So as soon as they sent 3 lobbyists in to Alabama, and as soon as there was a delay because the sponsor's daughter was graduating from high school, I think, or something, I mean, it was sad. And so he asked for the delay. As soon as that happened, the lobbyists moved in and they created the controversy that we usually create when we want a no vote. And they, there was a senator that said he was going to filibuster if it came to the Senate, and they never gave it a hearing, and they never gave it a vote on the full House floor. So it died. The author was wonderful. The sponsors learned as he went along, learned what to do next time, perhaps, and said he was going to keep going next time on it. But I hope they learned not to have a press conference when you do a rescission, because it got.
Why are the Republicans so against this?
Oh, they're against it because the people who give them money are that's the thing they fear most, is rescissions, because that's the only thing that can stop them when they don't have 34 states to give. So any rescission in a Democrat state, even when it's not their own application, they send people from ALEC, the American Legislative Exchange Council, the globalists from the right who do the resort conventions they have 2,000 members or something. They sent ALEC out with Wolfpack to testify against rescission in New Jersey. All they had passed was the Wolfpack application, the George Soros one. ALEC was testifying on their side because they're all afraid of rescissions. Democrat states, anything. It's their worst nightmare. So if you can introduce it and not look like you're going to do anything with it, they might let you go. That's how the Republicans and Democrats rescinded in Nevada in 2017. They did it through the Republican GOP county committees and the state level, and then they worked together. And before they had their first hearing, they had all their sponsors. They were behind the scenes, wonderful. And all of a sudden, it got public and it passed before the people could send their suits out to testify against it. When they finally did, nobody listened to them. They were committed. So, to go into a Republican state, you send out a blast in the state. You have people writing to Republican legislators. They'll pick up the phone, they'll call Mark Meckler, and they'll say, what do we do about this? You're the expert on this. And and Meckler tells him he has an army of 5 million people, tens of thousands in their state. He'll get them out. They twist their arms and they tell them they'll primary them in the election. They have fears of these people, like you saw at in the Silicon Valley Mountain View trade shows. They tell them that they'll be walking their precincts and for their opponent in the election. And they believe them. They believe they have that many people. They put $300,000 into trying to get rid of people in I think it was Montana. They also did in South Dakota campaigns, these little tiny states. They put tons of money into the campaigns. They failed. They backfired on them. But, these legislators are afraid of the Convention of States. That's why they hate to see it come up every year. They live in fear of this, and especially the legislators who stand up against them. It's brutal.
There's a lot of power in the people. However, the people are not well informed of this. And as we can get informed, then we can work on our legislators to support against the Convention of States. So it's getting people educated on this. How can we do that? So I asked a question on Eagle Forum. So at the national level in Eagle Forum, have they been tracking through the Alabama Eagle Forum what's going on reference to Convention of States and mentoring them, if you will, on how to push this through to get the approval rescinded?
In Alabama, Rick, in Alabama, you have one of the most outstanding Eagle Forum leaders, Judi Smith. She was Phyllis Schlafly's first vice president, and after her death, she served as the president for, I think, maybe 2 or 3 years. So if you can contact Judi Smith, she is really sharp on this topic, as
She
she
was
is on
there.
all topics.
Yeah, she was in the middle of it. She knows the senators, you know, she knows them by first name, and she was out there lobbying them. And, you know, it just slipped out from under all of us. It's very difficult to fight millions of dollars.
Well, with
it's
that, we
something-
should wrap it up for the evening. If you want to say one more thing really quick, Rick, but we
That's
should.
all right.
wrap up the
That's
evening.
all right. I'm done. Thanks.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I appreciate
I wanted to let you know that Rick is this most amazing man. He sends out probably 10 fantastic links to different articles on different subjects about once a month. What do you call your website, Rick?
Well, it's an email blast. It's you all remember the song "Where Have All the Flowers Gone"?
Yes.
Okay, well, I had another verse called "Where Has All the Common Sense Gone?"
That's right.
and I get information from many sources, some from Orlean, others from a network of folks that I'm on the national stage. You may remember some names like Peter McCullough,
Yes.
Jane Ruby, Peter Chambers, Dr. Pete Chambers, Lee Valite, Tom Rentz, Todd Callender, Brian Ward, Reiner Fulmick. They're on this email blast. Tom Vallely, or I should say Paul Vallely, Tom McInerney, Ann Vandersteel, Jane Ruby, Sherry Tenpenny, on and on and on.
Sounds like the
And-
Reawaken America tour to me.
and
Sure
we-
does sound
and
like
there's a lot,
that.
there's a lot across the world too.
Yes.
And I'll put out information that I get from these folks and in this email blast. And I'll put out whenever I can. Lately, it's been coming out about every 4 or 5 days because there's just so much stuff going on. And when I get time to actually put it together, it's on a lot of the different events of the day. But I haven't really gotten a lot on the Convention of States here, other than Orleans was in Orleans' book that I passed on some of the past updates. Just a ton of information that we have to get out, we the people. One of their big
Yeah.
messages is work local. And then you got to work at your city, your town, work up at your state level. So if I would have known more about this thing, and is there some like 1 or 2 page point paper that I can pass out to people that says this Convention of States is a bad idea. I saw something there on the last chart that was up there briefly, but
I put out a one pager of questions to ask people that are for the con. When I had put together a presentation about this quite a few years back. And so I can help get that information to you. I'm happy to email it to you if that's helpful. And
Judi has a great page of talking points too that she sends out to all of us when she asks us to write to the state legislators.
Yes, so Judi, if you can make sure that you send that to me, then we'll make sure to get some extra information out about this topic.
And anyone who wants the blast list to be on my blast list, that would be wonderful. I mean,
okay.
Make a suggestion to those of us who receive hundreds of emails daily. Please, Summer or Orlean, I look for the email. If it's anybody else sending out the email, you may as well not waste your time sending it to me. I won't know about it. I will pass it by. And I'm because organizations are so good about having individuals send out email blasts, and they don't, unless you've got the organization name like Eagle Forum of California, like some of you do, you do. Orlean, you do not. And it goes on and on. If we just had some consistency in the format, and then when you want other people that are special sending us stuff, put that information in one of yours and you folks send it out. I'm sorry to say that.
Yes, well, no, and I agree that we need to keep coalitioning here, and that's what Eagle Forum is best known for, is that we are a forum and we do coalition with great people, which is why we do these webinars and get these speakers here. And we try to consolidate the information and give you those action points. And then we're revamping our website. And the plan is that when you go to our website, you will be able to easily find these things moving forward. So that's what we're working on. And we have our constitutional convention that's coming up. It'll be in Sonoma County, correct, Orlean? And
Yes,
just a
at
few
the
weeks.
Heartwood Church in a wonderful Baptist church in Runner Park. And Summer is coming to be one of our speakers, which we're really excited about.
So this is going to be September 16th. That's a Saturday. It'll be 9 to 4 p.m. You can find out more information about that on our Eagle Forum newsletters or from the Eagle Forum website. It's up there. I hope it is.
It
And
is.
great. And then I think even on the national website, if you click on California, I think it is also up there. So we have that coming up in just a couple weeks, and we'd love for you guys to join us so that you can be a part of this celebration of our Constitution. And the theme is protecting life, liberty, and property. So we would love to see you there, and if we can streamline it so that people that aren't able to attend in person can see it, we'll work on doing that. So keep a lookout for other things coming up about Eagle Forum. I know that our chapters across the state are also doing things, so just keep a lookout. We'll do our best to keep you informed, and we should really conclude this evening. So Orlean, would you like to give us a prayer? I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording for tonight, and we thank everybody for joining us.
All right. Heavenly Father, we're very grateful for this